Today, I am thrilled to be presenting to you the topic about breaking down silos. We're going to talk about how to build a more functional organization so you can raise more money. Quick housekeeping, super quick. You will get the recording and slides after the completion of today's event. Questions will be answered at the very, very end. My friend, colleague, Tricia will be here to answer chat questions, or if you raise your hand, she'll reach out to you and find out what she can help you with and such. And please feel free to put questions in the Q&A, but I won't be addressing them until the very end because we've got, this is like 2 days worth of information that I'm going to try and get through in less than an hour, of course. If you want to learn more about MarketSmart, you can always go to our website. If you sign up for a demonstration, you'll find that it's never salesy or pressure oriented. There's no arm twisting. It's just educational, informative, collaborative. So with that, I am Greg Warner. I'm the CEO and founder of MarketSmart. If you like what I have to say today or want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be thrilled. I love to engage on LinkedIn and chat with people and share my knowledge and insights. I am the author of Engagement Fundraising, which I know this link is very tiny, but Tricia will put the link in the chat. We give away copies of the book. People still buy it. We give away all the money that gets generated from that book anyway to a charity related to diabetes research. But if you want a copy of the book, a hard copy, most people get a digital copy or they want the audio book, we will send it to you, no problem, free of charge. Happy to do it. I'm also the inventor of the fundraising report card, which is a free tool I developed for the sector. There's now, I think, 14,000 users, which is great. It's an analytics and metrics tool. It's kind of like, think of Excel or Tableau on steroids, and it takes just a couple seconds to analyze your data. Doesn't need much data, and it'll show you all the charts that you need to show your fundraising performance to the board, quarterly, or leadership, or just to do an analysis of how you're doing. Also, if you have any trouble, we'll actually help you with that analysis for free. So this is a free app. It's pretty darn powerful. People keep pressuring me, well, my board, to turn it into a, to sell it because it's that good. But if you're interested in that, take a look at that. And then I also invented the DAF widget. That's another technology I developed to help nonprofits, and that's another free one. We don't charge for that. It's just because I think there's too much money sitting in donor advised funds. And this widget, if you put it on your website, will help you get more donor advised fund dollars. It reduces friction in that process for the donors. Also, I developed the e-course with Dr. James, which I'll talk about at the very end of this. And that's an online training course. And it's the only one of its kind. It's very unique. So I'll get into that in a little while. But MarketSmart, quick 1-2 about us. Many people wonder what the heck we do, and it's very simple. It's just that most major gifts, including planned gifts teams, don't really have the marketing support they need. So we are an outsourced, turnkey, done-for-you marketing software and service team. So think of us as your outsourced team. What we do is we deploy it's artificial intelligence automated systems that help you land more meetings with major donor prospects when they are ready to talk about giving major gifts of assets and legacy gifts. So we do that, and we've really perfected it. So we're not afraid to offer a 10-to-1 return on investment guarantee. We actually aim for 100-to-1 return on investment is our goal, all to help you be the fundraisers that you always wanted to be. So that's what we do, but we're going to talk about breaking down silos today. This is mostly based on the research conducted by Dr. Russell James, who many of you may already know is a world-class educator and researcher. He's been published in all the peer-reviewed scientific journals and quoted in all the major media, and most recently was awarded the Hall of Fame for the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners. He has a PhD in consumer economics. He's been a plan giving director. He's been a president of a college where he completed major campaigns and built debt-free buildings and tripled enrollment. So I would say this man knows what he's talking about. Before we get into his information, I'm gonna tell you that as a leader of a business, I have learned a lot and employed Gino Wickman's EOS system. So if you're in leadership, senior leadership, or if you're a board member, excuse me, I highly recommend Traction to help build, break down silos. But really the quintessential, the book on this topic, if you want to read, it's maybe a 4 or 5 hour read. It's not that long. You'll want to get the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Between these two, this is what MarketSmart did in order to really break down silos and become more collaborative. You can see, if you don't believe me about that, you could see our rating and see what former staff have said about us on Glassdoor. Just make sure you look for MarketSmart Maryland, because there's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 different MarketSmarts on there. So you'll see, yeah, this stuff works. All right, so with that said, I'm going to be moving pretty quick today because there's so much to talk about. The agenda is we're going to try and understand the problem. In fact, I'm going to spend most of the time on that. And then we're going to talk about why there's urgency for fixing the problem. And then we'll get into how to fix the problem. Excuse me, one more time. Maybe take a drink. And the how to fix the problem is really mostly coming from Dr. Russell James' research. I do know that many of you took the assessment prior to this, and I will go over the results of the silo assessment, so to speak, at the very, very end, prior to answering questions. All right. Excuse me there, just a little coffee, get myself going. All right, so why do silos exist in organizations? This is what I call a flying golf ball problem. Flying golf ball problems mean like golf. If any of you play golf, I'm terrible at it, but golf balls are really hard to hit when they're flying around and people are throwing them at you. So you really got to just kind of place them down on the ground so you can hit them. And that makes sense of things. It's just easier that way. So I always look at a flying golf ball problem like this and be like, wow, this is sophisticated. Let's lay down some golf balls. And I'm going to lay down for you first, my perspective on this is that it all emanates from leadership, and poor leadership is going to create bureaucracy. Bureaucracy inhibits a staff member's ability to autonomously do meaningful work. Now, those, I don't know, 9 words were carefully selected because and the link is below, but Microsoft did a study that just came out fairly recently about what really drives disengagement in silos and dysfunction. And although it's like 110 pages of charts and all kinds of stuff, it all comes down to this core, is that when you inhibit a staff member's ability to autonomously do meaningful work, you rob from them all the joy of how they're trying to find meaning in their life. So that creates disengagement and reduces energy and interest. And then that's what reduces collaboration and creates silos. Another set of golf balls, though, especially related to this space, this sector, is that there are so many dissimilar teams involved in the operation. Everything from low dollar fundraisers to high dollar fundraisers. You've got events, communication staff, volunteers, board members, and so on. So that requires, or I should say that creates competing objectives, which also inhibits a staff member's ability to autonomously do meaningful work. And this is where leadership is very important. Otherwise, you end up getting misunderstandings, which drive reduced energy and interest, and then the distrust and the silos. Now, having said that, because these are probably sounding very familiar to you about what causes this, but in further study and looking at Dr. James' research, I broke it down into just these three golf balls for now, is what I'm really going to drive home, no pun intended, is that what we've got is we've got money, and we got relationships, and we got needs, right? So I'm just thinking of like my family. Like whenever you get money involved in something with my family members, it always creates a problem. And then what happens is the history of our relationships kind of get brought into situations, and then you've got the needs of each individual in the family and how those are different. So any group, when you bring in money, relationships, and needs, you're gonna have issues. Now, if you want to have a high performing operation, you need functionality. That's kind of like the grease in the wheels. If you don't have functionality, if you have dysfunction rather, then you end up with friction, and the operation will either overheat or it will seize and it'll just stop working. So let's focus on money first. This is the biggest golf ball, if you will. And the way I see it is that organizations really have this sort of, lack of a better word, polarization here, because you've got teams involved in and focused on low dollar, mostly acquisition events, focused on cash, really. And then you've got others that are focused on assets, but most of the budget, interestingly, is going towards the cash giving, while most of the revenue is coming from assets. So that's a little odd, to say the least. Generally in private sector business, you add fuel to the fire where you're getting the most revenue. But the nonprofit sector has been backwards in that regard. I could do a whole webinar on how to change that. But the short story is, I think acquisition, fundraising, and solicitation needs to go away, and that could be replaced with value add, engagement-oriented offers. Nevertheless, that I'll save that for a blog post for another day. But when you look at low dollar versus high dollar, or cash versus asset giving, I'm going to refer to our benchmarks in the fundraising report card, which I mentioned before. So not only do I give that app away for free, but what we get, because we give it away for free, is we get this data. It says 10,000 organizations. I think it's more like 14,000 are using this now. And here's what we find. Is that under $100 donors, the average donation amount is only 25 bucks, but the over $5,000 donors is more like $41,000. If that's not striking enough, look at the difference in retention rates. I mean, you're looking at more than double with the over $5,000 donors. Now, what's interesting about this is that figure has been increasing every year. It used to be lower 30s or even high 20s. Meanwhile, for the under $100 donors, the retention rate keeps going down. It used to be low 20s. Now it's 16%. I mean, that's just terrible. Lifetime value, of course, is related to retention. Is only 44 bucks with the cash givers, while in the higher realm, it's 75 grand. That doesn't even include legacy gifts, which clearly are going to, from wealthier people, are going to be larger. So you've got this sort of donors down, dollars up scenario hitting just about every nonprofit. It's rare that we see one come through the fundraising report card that isn't experiencing this scenario. If you agree, go ahead and say you're seeing that in the chat. If you are not seeing that, then either you might be wrong. You might want to put your data in the fundraising report card, or you might be doing something exceptionally well, and you probably have a high-performing team. Nevertheless, so what's going on here is what I call fundraising climate change. This is where what we used to call the 80-20 rule, or 20% of our donors will supply 80% of our revenue, which is very true in the private sector, and most businesses have that kind of Pareto principle is what it's called. But it's really become now 76% of the revenue is coming from 0.74% of the donors. Now, if you go all the way out to like, look at 85% of the revenue, I think Dr. James found it comes from about 15 or 14% of the donors, something. We'll look at that stat. But at the pinnacle here, it's kind of like there's no donor pyramid anymore. It's more like a, what do you call that? In Toronto, Seattle, it's like a space needle, really. So here's how this breaks down: is the over $5,000 donors, usually giving assets, or if they were converted to cash, but still assets. It's a very small part of a donor base that's making up the substantial portion of the revenue, while the under $100 cash donors are a large percentage of the database, but a very small portion of the revenue. Meanwhile, we talked about the budget being a little lopsided, so you can get a lot greater ROI from the asset givers and marketing to them than the lower dollar donors. This is important because it creates this schism. It creates a little bit of dysfunction internally, especially if everybody doesn't understand where the money is really coming from. And we'll get to more about that later. But the other thing about money is that most wealth is stored in assets, right? So like, think of it like there's two buckets. Do you want to sort of seek money from the bucket that has a lot of it? Or do you want to seek it from the cash bucket, which doesn't have a lot? I mean, this is wealth in America. You're looking at 1 to 3% is in cash, while the vast majority is held in stocks. Now, many people, and I've heard board members say, "What's the difference? $1 is $1. Let's get as much as we can from either side." Well, yes, but no, because the dollar to the donor is more painful to give from cash, even if they're wealthy. It just feels more painful to give from cash than to give from assets. And there's what Dr. James talks about is a lottery effect, so to speak, that you have with regard to giving assets. I mean, if you sell a business, for instance, all of a sudden giving $100,000 isn't that big a deal, especially if you sell it for multi-millions and millions of dollars. But still, giving cash just feels more weighty to people. That's just the way it works, according to the science researched by Dr. James. Now, in addition to this, wealthy people don't really know how to give away their money. And this is picking up to a degree. And the reason why it's increasing, and this is why we need fundraisers, one-to-one fundraising meetings, so much more now than we ever did, is because the ultra high net worth wealthy among them, fewer and fewer are becoming ultra high net worth wealthy through inheritance. And rather, more and more are becoming that wealthy through their own self-made efforts. We're talking about the millionaire next door. We're talking about the immigrants especially, and entrepreneurs, right? So this is a change of moving from dynasty and dynastic philanthropy to the millionaire next door philanthropist, whereby the dynasty family had taught their children, and their children just picked it up by seeing how their family used philanthropy or engaged with philanthropy. They were taught, they were around philanthropy. Think of Warren Buffett's son. Think of Bill Gates' family. They've been around the block. They know what it's all about. But the first generation wealthy, well, Bill Gates is that, but his family isn't, right? So the first generation wealthy, they spent so much time and energy focused on the accumulation of wealth that then they get to a certain age and stage in their life where they start searching for meaning now that they have security in a very different way. It's usually in the 50s and 60s that this happens. There's a great book by a guy named Arthur C. Brooks that talks about it. He spent 10 years researching it. It's called Strength to Strength. Unbelievably fantastic book if you want to get in the minds of some people. Anyway, at a certain age, people realize that they want to find meaning. They want to stop accumulating and start giving. And first generation wealthy, they just don't have the experience, and that's why they need fundraisers. That's why fundraisers like you are becoming exponentially more important at the same time that the solicitation and low dollar fundraising is not working as well as it used to. So I'm going to break this out a little bit more in more detail, the difference, because this is creating friction internally when you're focused on cash versus assets. Cash is easier. Sure, you could just send out an email or a mass mailer and you'll get some money. Getting assets is harder. It's a sophisticated approach, and it requires a great deal of strategic thinking. It's much less tactical, although unfortunately a lot of leaders try to create tactical metrics for fundraisers, like how many calls did you make, how many visits. I mean, this stuff is not consequential. It's off-putting and disrespectful, frankly, because mostly what we should be looking at is how many strategies have you developed, how many donors accepted your invitation to be on a journey to consider philanthropic giving. It's not tactical. So they try and take tactical metrics that are applied to cash giving and assign it to major gift officers, and that creates friction, discomfort, and so on and so forth. So you got to realize that asset giving is just as much focused on donor needs and delivering value to donors, while cash giving is much less. Just look at the solicitations and cash giving requests. It's mostly that we need the money, or there's something urgent, and it doesn't really take into account each donor's individual needs. The cash solicitations are more one way, while the asset conversations are going to be bilateral. It's much more social and intimate. The organizational focus, well, the donor trust level, clearly you need much higher trust level to give $50 million compared to $50. And there's going to be, it's going to take a lot of time, really about 2 years to close a serious major gift or more. And your organization needs to be comfortable with delayed gratification and understand that if they're seeking immediate gratification, that's going to become a problem if they try and impose that on asset giving. You need relationship builders for asset giving, not marketers and communicators like you need for cash solicitation development. The cost of those relationship builders is probably going to be higher than that of the annual fund people. I'm just figuring, no insult to anybody in annual fund. And the addressable market is actually small for assets. The rich are getting richer, I guess. And while the market for cash donors is large in terms of people, and it may be growing in terms of people, you'll see in a little bit that people are becoming less interested in giving cash. The revenue potential clearly is high for assets and growing. The interest in it, because of the first generation wealthy, is growing, while the interest in the solicitous nature, the solicitous cash kind of approach, direct mail, direct response, is low and it is declining. So the return on investment for cash marketing is poor compared to the return on investment for assets. I know many people still think that you need to acquire low dollar donors in order to get asset gifts. It's simply not true. I always figured that was not true when I first got into the sector as just a marketer, and we've proven it here at MarketSmart over and over and over again. If you've ever gotten a gift from somebody who wasn't on your radar, a major gift, and you were referred to them or something, you know what I'm talking about. If you were referred to them by a board member and so forth, they don't want to give a $50 gift to start. So that covers money, at least for now. And then I'm going to move on to relationships. We're talking about the difference between transactional relationships and more meaningful relationships. Now, back when I was in college, way back in the 80s, we were taught the Mark Knapp's relationship development model, which is pretty much common sense, I guess. But it's interesting when you look at it because, of course, there's a coming together and then there's a maintenance level. And then if things don't work out, there's kind of a breaking up and a termination. What happens with transactional giving is it's short and fleeting. But with meaningful relationships required for asset giving, it's going to be much more elongated. And in fact, you hope that it never ends, meaning there's permanence thanks to a legacy gift. So the difference between these, and of course, transactional is more related to cash giving, where meaningful is related to asset giving, is the organizational objective is very different. You're looking at getting money and trying to solicit charity, while on the meaningful end, you're looking at developing partnerships that support philanthropy. It's more about retention, loyalty, and lifetime value, even after lifetime with legacy giving value, and less about just acquiring donors and getting enough money to pay the electricity right now, so to speak. This is, you're looking at a life expectancy of the relationship, hopefully that's long-term or permanent. While in the solicitation game, as you saw from that data, 16% retention rate, clearly transactional giving has a short-term life expectancy. And that's due to the promotional solicitous nature that involves premiums and gimmicks and things like that, while personalized win-win exchanges of value that are supported by trust building and deep engagement, value delivery, these are going to be much more meaningful relationships. So we're not talking about, or I should say that where the friction really comes in is that you've got teams that are involved, or even board members who really understand the transactional, but don't necessarily understand the meaningful and what it takes. It can't be arm's length and superficial. You've got to put away with your self-gratification in order to get the more meaningful gifts. But these mindsets exist in most organizations, and it really creates friction that can overheat an organization and cause it to seize. So the donor, this all makes sense, I'm sure, is fairly, you're looking at trivial, fast, impulsive giving. And that's my other dog, so I gotta let him in. All right, there. Or he'll just keep scratching. So the other thing about this is that Dr. James calls the transactional giving, according to his research and science, he calls it evolutionarily unstable, while meaningful asset-oriented philanthropy is evolutionarily stable. What he means by that, and what his research shows, is that we humans operate in tribes if you will, and tribes make us feel safe, and they help us advance the human condition so that we improve things for each other and ourselves for the rest of our lives. The world is supposed to get better, and that we do that on purpose because we're trying to ensure evolutionary stability for our not just our tribe, but for all humans. So it's just been proven that meaningful relationships are evolutionarily stable. They contribute to the advancement of our society, while transactional relationships, while necessary, are not as, they're not contributing to that. So anyway, that gets a little wonky, but the bottom line I keep saying is that the difference between the kinds of relationships that we're seeking internally from our disparate teams and the types of money that we're going after are creating conflict and result in different needs that are pushing and pulling internally among the individuals involved in the success of the organization. The way Dr. James breaks this down is by looking at heroes. He looks at the giving of assets as a major donor hero story. In other words, major donors want to feel like the heroes in their own life story, very much like if you think of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, the old time movie. Scrooge did not change and become philanthropic until he saw his gravestone where it said that he died alone and a miser and unloved, right? Well, that's not heroic. Nobody wants to look at themselves in the mirror feeling that way about themselves. So major donors want to look themselves in the mirror knowing that they did good on this earth. But the problem is that the organization, the individuals involved, the staff, especially the administration, they want to feel like they're the heroes in the story as well. I mean, after all, they're doing darn good work. They're saving the world. They're building an operation that saves the world, you know? But this is a problem because in any good story, and especially if you want money from a major donor, you can't have two heroes in their story. There can only be one, according to Dr. James. Now, the real trouble for you all, if most of you are fundraisers, I'm assuming, especially major gift or legacy gift officers, is that there you are placed in between these two powerful figures. If we're kind of figuring the whole organization is one, you're in between. Your job is to be a facilitator and to be a guide and a sage for the major donor, and also a translator. And you're supposed to be the go-between between the organization's needs and the heroic donor's needs. But if there's another hero over here, meaning the organization, the administration team, the other staff, that creates a real problem. If any of you have ever not been able to call a donor that has major potential because then annual fund will lose out on their revenue, then that's exactly what I'm talking about. You know, it's not about whether annual fund gets the revenue or not. It's about what's in the best interest of the supporter, the donor. So this is the crux of where all this comes together and these different needs internally that create dysfunction. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that major gift officers especially become discredited and treated as others, or even worse, they get scapegoated by others within the organization. Unfortunately, sometimes especially the board or the finance department, scapegoated for not raising enough money fast enough, you know, when others are thinking transactionally, or they give you an identified prospect list and hit you on the back and say, go get them. And then 2 months later, they're like, where's the money? Like they were qualified because they have wealth. Well, that's not exactly how this works, right? So then you get scapegoated, and that's why there's such high rates of turnover in the sector, especially among major gift officers. But when you finally find a home where the organization treats you right and listens and breaks down the silos and allows you to do your good work as a facilitator and go-between, that's when fundraisers stay put. So these are the 3 golf balls that I have determined based on Dr. James' research that really create these silos. I hope you all agree. Maybe if you don't, feel free to ask questions or put comments in the chat, which I'll be looking at later. In the end, again, we need to take this operation and add functionality to that, which I'm going to get into. I'm going to talk about how we fix the problem, but first I'm going to get into a little bit more urgency on why we've got to fix that. And it's all related to that term I invented, fundraising climate change, the slow creeping changes happening that most people are not paying attention to, but I'm kind of been shouting from the rooftops for 10 years now that this is happening. I'm not Chicken Little. The sky really is starting to fall. So you could see it, and others are finally, studying this, thankfully. Probably, I guess you could say they have a lot more credibility than me. So I'm glad that they're doing this. The Lilly School found that the number of people, the percentage share of Americans who are donating is just dropping like a rock. I mean, and most of this drop has happened after the Great Recession, and the average amount given is also dropping. I mean, these are big drops and not good during inflationary times. Also, the trends are all kind of going in the wrong direction. We're looking at lower donor retention rates, revenue retention rates, kind of spotty there, but mostly on the way down. And again, this is all, you can look at your benchmark, the benchmarks if you go to the benchmarks page of the fundraising report card, or your own benchmarks. If you either reach out to us, we'll help you get your data in there, or we do have integrations that are automatic. First time donor retention down, reactivated donor retention down, repeat donor retention down. This is not good. This is not good. What I have always said is the reason for this, if you really want to boil it down, is it all comes down to trust. Because trust is the cornerstone and the foundation of all transactions, all giving, all relationship giving. If you don't trust someone, you will not give them money, period. Trust is going down. According to this same report, the younger folks trust even less. And that's why I say you really got to stop with this solicitous nature of your acquisition. It's not going to work. There's other ways to acquire new supporters and donors, but older folks too. Trust is going down. I have said that I believe this is because the populist, interruptive, annoying kind of solicitation, and I'll tell you, I know my name gets sold all the time, and I get these solicitations from organizations I've never even shown any interest in whatsoever. Without permission, it's not nice. It's not nice, and people don't like it. And the proof's in the pudding. Trust of non-government organizations is going down, especially among the informed public, which is your wealthier cohort. In fact, trust in private sector business is finally higher than by the general public than trust in NGOs. This is not a good trend. Add to this that fundraising is getting more expensive. I mean, many of you may know that just this past weekend, the US Post Office increased postage by 6.5%. That's quite a lot. Of course, with 9.1% inflation coming out yesterday as the year-over-year number seems, I mean, thankfully they didn't go that high, but that's just going to make your direct mail costs that much more expensive. Not to mention the fact that printing costs are going up. If you can even get envelopes, staff salaries are increasing, everything's kind of going up right now. And a recession could be looming here, which means that low dollar donors giving transactionally is going to dissipate, while the major donors will, in fact, get wealthier. This is what happens during recessions. Wealthy people pick up the crumbs, they buy the real estate and the businesses and so on, and then they become wealthier. So enough doom and gloom, okay? Let's talk about how we can fix the problem. I'm going to give you 5 ways to do this. The first one is quite challenging, in fact, because it makes you want to look at your leadership and determine whether or not the leadership that you have is one in which you really want to work for. It's easier said than done. Of course, I'm the owner of MarketSmart, 100%. I don't have, I have my board that I have to report to in the bank, but it's really up to me. So it's easy for me to say, but I was an employee for most of my career. And I know that when you have a poor leader, a weak leader, one that doesn't really have vision, and especially doesn't know how to get the right people in the right seats, and especially get the wrong people out of the organization, you want to start looking for another job, and take your time and do it right. Interview them and find leadership that you can believe in. You'll be so much happier. So check your leadership. I know it's easier said than done and quite painful to change jobs, but I think it's necessary for you to consider firing your employer. Now, I say in my I came up with an acronym. It's kind of crass. I always blame it on the fact that I grew up in New Jersey, but the acronym is CRAP. I always say, give our staff a lot of crap. Give them clarity, resources to do the job, accountability. Accountability is important. Make sure they know they're going to have to deliver, and then give them patience and praise. And if your leadership is not giving you that, then I would say that you probably want to consider looking around. But these are the keys that I have found for gaining alignment internally. And again, you could check us out on Glassdoor and see what others say for credibility purposes. The next thing is rebalancing of hero stories, which I talked about before, is that there really can only be one hero in the story. So the administration, when it comes to the raising of major gifts of assets, has got to remove their cape and allow the major gift officer, the planned gift officer, to be the conduit, the guide and the sage, the counselor for the major donor, while also being the translator for donor needs and seeing if there's a fit for administration and organizational needs. This doesn't mean you give all the power to the donor. No. You see if there's a fit and if you can make it work. But the organization should still maintain power and maintain their acceptance policies, and the major donor should not drive the ship. So that'll make a more functional organization if people respect the fundraiser. And we emphasize collaboration by respecting fundraisers, laying down the weapons, putting away the know-it-all attitude of how to raise money, because the gift officers, they understand that it's all about building relationships and helping the major donor give through the organization so they can accomplish what they want to accomplish, so they become the hero in their own life story and find meaning in their life within reason. And if there isn't a fit with your organization, then you need to feel comfortable referring them to other organizations. But the internal groups have to see and respect fundraisers as translators of donor desires and facilitating that with organizational needs, finding that fit and sort of negotiating the balance to deliver donor value. Because as Dr. James says, if you want $1 million or multi-million-dollar gift, you have to figure out the value that the donor wants in return for that gift. Some, it might be notoriety. Others, it might be anonymity, and there's so many other reasons, but you have to be able to put that together to create a value proposition that generates that amount of money. Now, the next part comes where Dr. James says that you need to take a federalist approach, which is separate but equal. A lot of us are getting a civics lesson right now with the Supreme Court and watching the power of the Supreme Court and the presidency, and we all understand the power of Congress. But what this means is that you need to make sure that the donors, the donors, the wording is a little screwed up. The donors should be able to gain some degree of power because it is their money, but the administration should have the authority. So that's the word I should have used a minute ago, because authority means that you can decline a gift if it doesn't fit with your values, or the donor is trying to become too powerful. But in the end, the key is to making sure that fundraisers are included and appreciated, not treated as others within the organization. That's the problem. You have to have a balance, a federalist, separate but equal balanced approach. Now, Dr. James, in his research, has provided this. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. If you get the slides, you'll be able to see it. But basically, he helps you understand how to look at organizational structure and how to create that balance. The last one is revise your metrics. I touched on this a minute ago, maybe 5 minutes ago, is the transactional and activity-based metrics, especially for the raising of major gifts, are stupid, to be blunt. They're directional, but not all that helpful. They treat gift officers poorly because you're applying transactional metrics to something that's relational. What you want to look at instead is look at the value of each gift officer's pipeline or their caseload portfolio, the size of it, not by people, but by potential, according to what the donors are saying. So if they say they're considering certain sizes of gifts, then you add all that together, that's your pipeline size per caseload. Then you want to look at the velocity or speed through which the deal is, if you will, is moving through, or the donor is moving through the consideration process. Because if they're moving so slowly, maybe you're not adding enough value at each stage of the consideration to help them think through the situation and hopefully give sooner. Generally, the more value you offer, and value needs to be unique to each stage of the consideration process for each donor, the more value you deliver and think about strategically, and the more time you spend thinking strategically, the more you can deliver that to increase the velocity and also increase the pipeline size. Now, when you take that and recognize that most organizations often give their fundraisers, their major gift officers, unrealistic and arbitrary goals, like I've heard boards say, oh yeah, you're going to raise 5% more this year because we need the money. Well, that's arbitrary. That's not helpful. And that creates dysfunction, creates silos. So you got to kill those kind of metrics, and you got to kill vanity metrics. You know, you don't need to look at like how many clicks did you get on an email or something, because that's a vanity metric. If you got Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, and Bill Gates, and Elon Musk, out of 40,000 emails you sent, but only those 4 were the 4 that opened them and clicked them, I don't think anybody would be upset with the success that it was only 4 out of 40,000. So vanity metric is that you got 10% click rate. It doesn't matter in terms of raising major gifts of assets. So when you combine all these together, if you're doing that wrong, then an organization is going to scapegoat the gift officer. If they're doing it right, then they'll recognize that it's a team effort, and everybody needs to be supportive of the gift officer's efforts to deliver value in return for money, so that the major donor equation works out and everybody wins. Within reason, again, look at your gift acceptance policies. So, all right, those are my top 5 ways based on Dr. James' research of how you can fix the problem. I want to get to your assessment results, especially for all of you who took the assessment. It is interesting. And then I'll take questions, which will be after the top of the hour. So I hope you can stick around if you only allotted an hour for this. I want to mention that all of this and much, much more is included in the Donor Story Epic Fundraising e-course that we designed based on, well, with Dr. James, based on his research and all of his new ideas. This is the only online fundraising training course that helps fundraisers improve their skills, but also helps staff work together more collaboratively to break down those silos. So this is very unique in this space. Again, it's based on the research conducted by Dr. James, and we talked about how great he is. What he helps you learn here is if you're a gift officer, for instance, what you should actually say based on research. I mean, he's got hundreds of sentences, phrases, and questions that you should ask donors based on what he's found really works, and he explains why it works. And he gets into how to get everybody rowing in the same direction and on the same page to help these sector-wide challenges, which I've heard plenty, is that there's too many myths and orthodoxies and traditions out there where people are wondering, hold on, what really works? Like, and has this person who's telling me that to do this or that, have they ever actually proven it by doing it themselves or looking at the research? And most of the case, it's no. Sadly, I've run across too many consultants, frankly, that haven't really done the job. So when people are misguided, it creates this internal friction, the silos, these misunderstandings, leading to high rates of staff turnover that challenge the sector. But this course can solve that for you. And it's designed so that an organization can subscribe, and then you can get unlimited students, which I'll just explain in a minute. You can see Cindy here at MD Anderson. Of course, she's a longtime MarketSmart customer. Thank you, Cindy, if you're on this. We really appreciate you. Has said that this has been very useful with sharing with her team. I don't think she shares the entire thing necessarily, although I'll get into that in a minute. Some details on what you'll get is you'll learn how to engage with those top supporters and ensure that most of your gifts come without, I emphasize, restrictions. It'll help your major gift officers improve their performance without making them work harder. It'll help you find outliers, meaning the super wealthy that are in your database, but you really can't find them through wealth screening. You learn to use the words that really work, and you'll be able to help everybody think more about how to raise money with a culture of philanthropy. So this course includes a lot of research, a lot of theory, and especially the practical application for raising major gifts, including legacy gifts, but also when you apply this, all levels of giving will increase. It's a very new way, truly new and innovative way of thinking about the hero story of the donor that Gary emphasized is a new way of thinking, and I would agree. So that's why I put this course together with Dr. James. So now you want to think like, okay, is this going to be beneficial for us? It is a lot initially, you might feel, but you don't have to take the whole course at one time. There's read-along transcripts that help make it much more digestible. Plus, you can download the audio while when you're commuting or working out, exercising. There's an online community that you can engage with and ask questions and post on a discussion board. But there's really these amazing, we didn't anticipate this being so great, was these live Q&A mastermind sessions that, and I know, Jill, you're on the call today, so feel free to post in the chat, but we used your testimonial here of how you're so privileged feeling to be able to participate in those mixers. I know it has been a tremendous value add with no extra cost. So there's also like worksheets and quizzes to help you and your team digest the information. And if you do take the entire course, you get 20.5 points or credits for your CFRE. There's like cliff notes as well to help you. These are summary sheets. And really best of all is there's a fast track version of this. What we've been finding is most people don't want to take the 20.5-hour course. So they use the fast track, which takes only 2.5 hours. It's got MarketSmart cartoons in it. It's very fun, easy, and more easy to share little bits and pieces because they're like 5 to 10-minute videos that maybe the communications department, for instance, just needs one, or maybe a board member just needs two. So it's easier that way. And it's, but if you want the deep dive, then, and you see the research behind all this, you can go to Dr. James's portion of the course. So again, this is designed for you to be easy, especially the fast track, or you could go into the deep dive with Dr. James and you get his super fun slides there. So you get all that, plus the mastermind mixers. It beats the heck out of another fundraising degree. Thanks, Julie, at another MarketSmart client. There's a couple of bonuses you get. You get Words That Work, which is like the most popular thing we ever created. It's still going. It's been 10 years, I think, since we did this with Dr. James on what works for philanthropic planned giving. How to raise major gifts in the aftermath of COVID is a special bonus training session. And then you also get my training on how to land meetings with major donors. So you get those 3 bonuses. It's a big value, but you get them for free. All of this is at a 30-day money-back guarantee. And let's see, so if you add all this up, it comes to $36.38 per person. We're not selling it for that amount. And in fact, it's regularly $19.97, but right now is the sign up registration period, which we're going to do just 2 times a year. So you could wait until Christmas time to sign up again, but during the registration period, it's really an annual subscription, and it's, let me fast forward, it's $9.99 per organization as a subscription. And then what you do is you add 5 more people at $25. Then all 6 can get the CFRE points. And after that $25 is paid, it's $1,024 total for the yearly subscription. And then it becomes unlimited to all of your staff, your board, volunteers, new staff as they come on board, whomever you want all year long. So highly recommend that. It's not per person. That's one price all year, every year as a subscription. And I hope that makes sense. The offer, though, does end on July 19th at 3 p.m. sharp. So if you need to get approval, please, I recommend you do that now. One more time on how this works. It's $9.99. You'll lock in that rate forever as long as you maintain the subscription. You get the one person for 20 CFRE credits. You can add additional 5 people for $25. And then after that, that opens up the floodgates. It's a total then of $1,024, and it's unlimited for all of your staff. 30-day money back guarantee. If you get in there, you think it's not what we promised or something, you don't like it, we'll just give you your money back. I think that's only happened once so far. And if you want to come back to it after this, just go to our main page at imarketsmart.com and click on the e-course, or you can use that link, the training.imarketsmart.com/donor story training. All right, so with that, I'm exactly just about 1 minute before the top of the hour. So woo, I really got that stuck in there. Let's go through the assessment results, and then we'll talk about your questions, if there are any. So here's the assessment that some of you, many of you had taken. The first question I was, I guess it was a little bit of a poke in the nose for me, because I was hoping the results would be a little bit better. Not to sound too disappointed, but all teams working at my organization, not just the fundraisers, recognize and agree that providing value to supporters is essential for building trusting relationships. Probably should have said that lead to major giving. But I was sad to see that it wasn't more heavily tilted, but I guess there's a little bit of work left to go. Now, this was really big, is that all teams have a clear understanding of the process donors undergo in considering consequential major gifts of assets. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by this, because most people are not wealthy and have not gotten to the age where they're really seriously thinking about legacy giving. So they generally understand transactional giving, but consequential giving is harder for staff to understand. But it is important for this chart to change and kind of go the other direction in order to build, break down silos and build optimal functionality among disparate teams. So I'd say that most of us who filled out this survey have some work to do in this area to make sure that we teach others in the organization about what we do and how this how their salaries actually get paid. Where does the money really come from, and how does this work? All teams understand and accept the fact that major donor dollars come from major gifts of assets and large legacy gifts. These are more so outliers, and that focusing on raising these kinds of gifts generates the most revenue at lowest cost. So if we weren't surprised by the other past survey answer, this one, I guess, falls right in line. That most people apparently in the organization just don't understand that where most of the revenue comes from. So then all teams adhere to a collaborative approach that involves separate but equal power. This is that federalist approach. And as a result, from input from fundraisers and donors is accepted. And this should have included, that fundraisers are respected. And that's not so much. It could show some improvement there. All teams recognize and agree that a fundraiser's job involves operating as a champion for and provider of donor value, as well as the translator for donor needs. And unfortunately, it looks like there's some work that could be done in that area as well. All teams work together to make sure fundraisers are not discredited or treated as others, and rather are supported, heard, and collaborated with in relation to donor needs and the provision of value. That unfortunately could use some work, clearly, as well. I think we have two more. All teams work together to report back to donors so they continue to recognize the value they gain through their philanthropic contributions. And sadly, it looks like not everybody works together in that respect. So yeah, that was the last one. So those are your assessment results. Clearly, I think there's some work that can be done among most organizations in that regard. I hope that was helpful to you. In fact, I should let you know that I talked about those questions with Dr. James, and he decided that he's finally going to work on improving assessment questions just like that. And we'll probably be helping him, like we always have, to develop technology so that organizations can create and assess themselves from year to year to make sure they're building functionality and moving in the right direction. So with that, I will now get to the Q&A, but I'm in higher ed. Our previous VP spent years breaking down silos. Our new VP shows signs of favoring silos. Is there any way we can continue the broken silo way of operating? None of us want to be siloed again. Leaders can really change directions of operations, and they can pollute them. So I would say send, although this might be bad, send this to that person. That's the problem. Or if you can create a groundswell internally of collaborative people who want, and I would say get that book on the 5 dysfunctions of a team and see if you can get your VP to engage in collaborative sessions of studying that book. That's what my team did years ago. That was our first step. We read the book together and we worked on it. It's kind of like you have to recognize you have a problem. I don't know how well that will go with telling your VP that they're creating dysfunction. But hopefully, yeah, I mean, look, that's one of the dysfunction of a team. You need to have radical transparency. It's in that book. And if you can't with your leader, then frankly, they're actually not a leader. They're just a boss. So that's a problem. I hope that was a helpful answer for you. All right, so let's see. I'm going to go into the chat and see if there are any other questions. And it looks like there are no other questions. So get them in now, or we will just, we'll part ways for now. I'll see if anyone else is typing, but it looks like they aren't. So look, I'll wrap this up today. I see a round of applause from one of my favorite customers, Jill. Thank you, Jill. Really appreciate this. And thanks for the kudos from the others. Yeah, so if you need anything else, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I look forward to engaging with you again. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great rest of your week. Keep cool. Bye-bye.